Hey fellow Pokemon Premier League fans, Wolf here with the week 3 power rankings. Usually I would have my partner in crime Websis with me right now, but he has been very busy lately, so these power rankings are made and presented only by me this time around. Also as a side note, I'm trying to make them a little quicker than the last two have been, but we will see if that works out. Anyways, let's just get right to it. At the 14th slot I've put Ellie. In the post-draft rankings I've put her at the 6th slot because I like the offensive potential of the squad, but we already talked about some clear weaknesses and those have really shown in the first 3 weeks. Like the giant fairy weakness made the revolve room kinda necessary to come to every game and to mostly be defensive, and also even for it's a Terra captain it doesn't really want to Terra because you need that typing. So that is kind of a struggle. And also the huge hazard weakness of the squad, especially now in the week 3 game where Ellie is facing Mew, Tinglu and Spidops. She was like, okay, I'm gonna make the hard call, my opponent is not gonna bring hazards, so I'm not only not bringing any spin, I mean my spinners are very low tier, so yeah, but I'm also not running a single boots, and that was not optimal during the game, let's say it like this. Like especially the Tornadoes would have had an incredible value if it would have just been able to recover all the time. Also, I like the idea of the screens offense with the screens Rotom, but the Rotom really struggled during the game to actually get the screens up and to actually have them stay up against the Psychic Fangs Mew. And another problem was that even when the screens were up, then she decided, okay, let's nasty plot with my Tornadoes, let's put on some offensive pressure. You would think, yeah, that's great, but there was just a Tinglu that walled it. You could say, okay, yeah, Tinglu walls a lot of mons. What's the big deal? Well, it kinda walled everything. Like, it was an AV set, so it had no recovery, and yes, you can slowly chip it down, but it was a big problem. And also, she did not really go for chipping it down. Like, I think she should have done one of two things. Either bring a breaker that specifically threatens the Tinglu, or try to really chip it down, to force it in a lot, let it take chip from attacks and from stealth rocks. And she even brought a set that I really liked for that purpose, which is the Revolve Room with Toxic. I thought that is great, but then the Revolve Room just chilled in the back for most of the game, just to be an amorous answer later. So we struggled to break through, and it was then a difficult game. And then at the end, yes, the Hooper Unbound set with Blunder Policy could have still won. That's the classic thing of an inconsistent set. So I sadly had to put Ellie at the 14th spot because, well, I didn't really want to. But then I looked at all the other teams and I had none that I could reasonably justify putting below her. Then, at the 13th spot, we have Nexus. For Nexus, I liked once again the offensive part of the team generally. The one big problem, as also shown in the latest game, in the game of week 3 against Ruby, was the hazard control. Because you only have the Cryogonal that can spin. The thing with Cryogonal, your opponent's thinking either, okay, they don't have Cryogonal and I can just hazard stack them and then I have good chances to win the game. Even if the Cryogonal comes, then there's a Cryogonal. Like there's a non-terror Cryogonal, what is it gonna do? And then in this specific game against Ruby here in week 3, turn 1, you set up the hazards, you are playing against the Sun team, you want to keep those hazards up, you want to limit the Torkoal switching in, and you generally, also your opponent didn't have a lot of removal either, so you like that idea. Okay, great. Then turn 2, you're like, okay, I don't want them to just immediately rapid spin, so I will just spin block them with Typhlosion, which, yes, I can understand, and it is okay-ish, but you took a lot of Stealth Rock damage, and then the Earth Power from the Torkoal the turn after, just staying in and trying to spin block, whilst you could have just, in my opinion, stayed in with a Powdown, because yes, even if the Torkoal spins, then you just EQ it. Like the Torkoal is the most important one of the enemy team when they're playing full Sun. If you get chip on the Torkoal, that's great, you can just rock next turn. Like what do they want to do? Like they have nothing against that. Like if you then rock next turn and they switch, okay, then you're in the same situation, just the rocks are up and you have chip on the Torkoal, so yeah. Also then later in the game, when it was Slowking against the Walking Wake, I definitely get, yeah, you can't really predict the enemy Walking Wake to be Lumberry, so it doesn't get T-waved. Okay, But in general, you didn't really have to go for T-Wave there. When you were up against it, you could have just Psychic spammed it. Like, yeah, okay, I get the point. You don't want Brute Bonnet to come in for free on the Psychic. Well, it kinda comes in for free on the T-Wave anyways. Like, yes, you have 25% chance that it doesn't attack you that turn, but you can't ever bank on that. So it doesn't really do that much, right? And then, which I just have to mention, I don't think that that is actually what happened, but it seemed like it at the end of the video. The way he sounded and the way he hovered over his moves, it didn't really seem like he ever considered clicking a Cell Rock against the potential Sucker Punch. Like, yes, it's a classic 50-50. The opponent can click Sucker Punch, the opponent can also not click Sucker Punch, and you will not kill with one Excel Rock. But it did not feel like he even considered it, but I obviously can't know that. Let's just come to the 12th spot, which is El Cesar. I still don't like his team. I originally ranked him as the 14th slot at the start because, well, I don't like the stally defensive strats, and I don't think they are very good, or I think they are too easy to exploit by opponents. And this week, we kind of saw such an exploit, because when El Cesar played against Edison, there was a Gardevoir that just traced stamina and it was kinda unbeatable. Yeah, he didn't bring any phasing or anything to stop setup in general, which is something you should always have in mind when you're playing with a team like his. Because it has so much bulk, because it has so much bulk and it can be kind of passive, your opponent will always think of a way of like a defensive or like a defensive offensive setup sweeper to somehow break through and then just win the whole game. And that's exactly what Edison was going for. Because once she traced the stamina with Mudstell, the game was kind of over. At that point, maybe he could have still done something if he went into a really strong offensive threat right away, but that would have been really risky. But the way he did it, going into Corv and then you turning out, the game was just over, barring crits and other things. Because yeah, you get in your threat, but then the Gardevoir was already at +1 defense. Then soon it was at +2 defense, and then you just can't deal with it anymore. And I think you should have had something, like a raw Mudstell, or just generally something. I mean, he did get through the Gardevoir just by Ice Punch freezing, and then he Ice Punch froze another one as well. So that was great, but he should have also gone for the freezes earlier. Because before he went for the freezes, he first went for the crit, which is less likely than the freeze, yes, but he only really needs to get it once, and with the freeze he also needs the Gardevoir to not fall for a bunch of turns, so I get that idea. But then he went for a self, which even with a crit would not have beaten the Gardevoir, which was kinda a throw of a mon, and then only he tried to freeze it. But that's kinda a minor thing, because he was very clearly already really lost. Like maybe he still had a chance if he throws it right away, whilst he still had a Roaring Moon and the Self. But generally the game was just not looking good. It was not great. And I just fear that many people will find some defensive set that can actually exploit him. And he always needs to bring something that stops those sets. And that will also always be problematic. Then, at the 11th spot, I've put Q the Costa Rican, who I originally had at the 13th spot, with his very hyper offense team. In this week's game, it showed again, it was just basically a classic hyper offense team. It was dual screen Grimmsnarl with a bunch of setup mons, which I generally liked. It was a great bring, especially against Mephisto, who also has a very offensively oriented team. The idea of just going dual screen hyper offense looked really good in that matchup. But then, after the Grimmsnarl set up the screens, there was just low kicks coming in that just brick-breaked it, killed the Grimmsnarl and broke the screens, and then we had nothing, no screens and no Grimmsnarl. Against the GU, he went for both of the screens. What he said was, okay, when the low kicks comes in, if I don't have my screen up, the first impression will just kill me before I can get the reflect up. Which, yeah, I can understand that. The problem is, it doesn't matter if you have the reflect up when the low kick comes just in and clicks brick break and kills you and the screens at the same time, and you can't pranks the screen against it anyways then, because it just breaks it right away. And if you attack, you're dead already anyways. So in each case, when they go low kicks, you just lose by clicking Reflect. In the end, the game was really still very close, especially because of Terra Melueta, which I still am really glad that it's actually doing work this season. I really liked it. It was a very, very close end game, and his loss last week was also very close. So I wanted to put him higher than the 13th spot where I had him, because he still showed that the team is a threat. Then at the 10th spot, I put Ruby, who also rose from my original ranking of 12th spot. And I'm first already gonna start with a bit of team building criticism, because I looked at the matchup and I felt like, okay, Brute Bonnet can really go in. Like, yeah, it is Sun against Sand and kinda Hail with Slow King. Brute Bonnet is amazing against both weather setters from the opponent, and it can really go in. So I was hoping that we try to really pressure those weather setters with Brute Bonnet or other mons, but generally Brute Bonnet works well for it. And he didn't really have, well, he kinda had the same plan, but not really. On his Brute Bonnet, his set was also something to deal with the Typhlosion, which I can understand, but I would have really liked to see a move like Crunch on there. The set was Bullet Seed, Sucker Punch, Terra Blast, Fire. Don't even remember what his last move were. But it was nothing that really punishes switch-ins, is my big problem. Because yes, you have the Brute Bonnet in and then you scare out a Hippowdon or a Slow King, but it doesn't really gain you much when you don't damage whatever switches into you. And there's a Salamence on the opposing team that you can't really touch with the set that he brought. And yes, you could say even if you have Crunch, you don't deal that much damage to a Salamence. Like, it intimidates you, maybe it's defensive, yeah. But at least if it's offensive, you don't have to immediately fear about losing the whole game when it starts D-dancing against you when it switches in, just because you can't touch it at all, and you always have to switch out. I would have liked to see either Crunch or Spore or something that just gives you progress against those very likely switch-ins into Brute Bonnet. Also, one specific play during the game with the Klefki against the Slow King, he went for paralyzing the Slow King, which I didn't feel like achieves much, but I was still behind the play. I'm like, okay, you wanna just get yourself some dead turns from your opponent. Maybe it wants to click momentum move, but it can't, and that gets you something. Like, yeah, that's fine. But then afterwards, he decided, okay, I'm gonna start Calm Minding against it, even for his opponent had no hazard removal, and he could have clicked Spike, which immediately would have killed the Typhlosion on switch in because it was very low, and generally would have punished the opposing team a lot, especially because his main focus was chipping down the Hippowdon that really, really hates to take that Spike each time. And even if you Calm Mind, your Draining Kiss is not gonna do anything to that Hippowdon. And then the next turn, he just suicided for spikes, but he could have just spiked further. He could have just spiked earlier and then spiked more and gotten off more layers to the 9th spot, which is Gray, aka Check, who I originally had on the 11th spot, but now I put him on the 9th spot because, well, he has a 2-1 record, which is decent. And I did like the general idea he brought to the table against Ellie this week. Like, he had a cool Mew set that he led with. Like the Life Orb offensive Mew with Stealth Rocks. I really liked that one. That was just meant to prevent screens and to set up rocks. Then you have the Iron Hands Scarf, which is definitely an interesting bring and not something you see often. I can definitely see why he did it in the matchup, and I think it was a good call. And in the end, it is what won him the game. So, yes. And then he brought a really cool Spider-Ups, and I mean, I can't really, yeah. But then at the same time, not everything was perfect. Because he was often in with the Ting-Lu, and the Ting-Lu was very safe on the field, and it had a move that just hits everything for good damage that he could have basically always clicked, and that would have given him a lot of progress. This move is called Ruination, and he chose to never click it. It felt like the best move basically every time Ting-Lu was on the field. And it always clicked Heavy Slam, and it never achieved anything by clicking Heavy Slam. So that is definitely my biggest gripe with this game. And then the other thing was, which is only like a very minor thing. Well, it's not a minor thing because it cost him a full turn, but it's a minor thing because it's not something I expect everybody to know, is that he used a fling with Spider-Ups and it failed because there was no target, and then he didn't check if he still has the Iron Ball or not. And he just expected, okay, the fling failed, I still must have my item. So next turn he went for fling again, and it failed again because he already used up the item the first time. So he wasted a full turn on that. But it didn't matter that much because he then afterwards just counter-killed the Landorus, which was a really great time. But yeah, generally I can say, let's say it like this, I think he's doing fine, but I'm not really impressed. This is what I can call this. That's why he's the 9th spot with 2-1. Even for there are other people over him, which I want to underscore. Then, for the 8th spot, well, it would be under the radar. But as you are almost likely aware, Kelly, aka Under the Radar, had to step down from this league and their week 3 game had to be forfeited. There's not really a lot I really can or want to say about his ranking here. Let's say it like this. His team will stay close to where it already was. I mean, he won he won 1 game, he lost 1 game, now it's a forfeit loss, but a forfeit loss, is that really a loss? Well, yes it is, but does that really show a different power level of the team because you forfeit lost? Not really. But yeah, anyways, Uzi Gunner is taking over the team and they will start right there at this spot in my power rankings at the 8th slot, and I can't wait to see how they perform and if they change anything or if they make any crazy changes to the team. Then at the 7th slot I put Shackle King, who I originally had at the 4th slot in my original power rankings. And yeah, he's lost 2 games, he's won only 1. He lost his week 3 game, so I felt like I had to put him lower, but I didn't want to put him like that low on the list. Like in his week 3 game against Montay, everything he did was very reasonable. I really did like his approach to the game, with the Espeon lead, with screens, set up on a bunch of mons, especially behind the screens, especially because you have such a huge speed edge on your opponent. Like, I did really like that approach, but I think the opponent's approach of Trick Room was just better, or it just worked better in this situation. So I don't fault Shackle King that heavily for this loss. Like, yeah, there were things like, okay, at first I was watching Montay's perspective and I was like, okay, why did he just randomly sack the Espeon against Kilowattrel, for example? But then later on I learned, okay, Shackle King calced and he was confident that it's modest Kilowattrel and that's what he speed grabbed. He just didn't expect Scarf. And yeah, I mean, it's never optimal if you don't expect something and then it wins against you, but that can happen. The one weak point I would say, okay, he went into Goldango against Breloom and was very, very confident that Breloom cannot hit him, even though it obviously has Bulldoze. Yeah, like, not that it just killed the Goldango, that didn't happen, but that definitely felt like a very strange moment. Let's say it like this. As I said, I generally like the idea of screens setup. I think it fits it really well, this team, because the opponent's team is so much slower and has decent bulk, so you can just go for it. Then, on the 6th slot, we have Pokeaim. Well, I originally had him on the 9th slot, and now he is creeped up to the 6th slot, even though he's only won 1 game and lost 2. You could say, how did this happen? Well, it is because I felt like he didn't play that poorly, even though he lost. Like his week 3 game, you could say Hex was a bit involved. You could say that. I mean, yeah, he obviously still lost the game. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. But he did for the most part play well. There was one thing that he also talked about during his video as well, like that he noticed as well, which was after his Samurott got frozen, he tried for a bunch of turns to get chip on the opposing Greninja with the Samurott, even though he knew that this might be his demise if he does not fall and he does not get the chip. And well, that is exactly what happened. The Greninja managed to kill the Samurott, got the boost via Battle Bond, and then killed everything else because it lived Banded E-Speed with the Chilam Berry. Otherwise, I think his prep was good for this game. Like, I am a big fan of Scarf Annihilate in general, and I think it made a lot of sense. It was a good spin blocker, it was very scary, it almost swept it. Yeah, it was very scary. Then we had the Specs Delphox, which just claims kills, unless it misses Overheat 2 times in a row, but generally claims kills. So I think this was also a great bring. And then we have the Assault with Samurott, which I also think was a great bring. Well, the Greninja and kinda the Articuno, but it's gonna just Terra on you and just kill you anyways probably, but if you're AV, you're gonna take a hit, the +1, but yeah, you don't deal that much to it, so can kinda set up because you're fully defensive. But still, I think the Samurott made a lot of sense. You just try to get as much spikes up as possible. You always spin block with the Annihilate, which worked out great, because especially if the U-turn, you just get basically a free Rage Fist boost. I did really like that idea. And also, against the Articuno, he first scouted for Terra Fighting, which he expected, and went into Slowbro and did not risk it. Like, I think he was doing fine, just that the game didn't really like what was going on. And then afterwards he made like one mistake, and that cost him the game. Because, okay, if he doesn't let the Green Ninja get a kill and get the Battle Bond, then it cannot sweep. So that would have always been the play, to try to stop it. And yeah, he made the mistake of just trying to forward with the Samurott for a bunch of turns and giving the opponent 3 turns, which was not great, and it cost him the game. So I felt I can still put him higher on the list than I originally had him, because, well, those were decent games. Like, yeah, obviously, that's the risk of running moves with lower accuracy, is that you can miss them. And obviously, if your opponent clicks Ice Beam, there's always the chance to freeze you. That is part of the game. But in general, I think he did fine. Gonna look at number 5, which is Envy, who exactly kept the spot he was in. He's 2-1, and well, he was the opponent of Under the Radar and got the forfeit win this week. So yeah, what can I say? He was 1-1, now he's 2-1. Does the forfeit win make his team better? Not really. Anyways, what can I say? The first week he got swept by Sneasel, but was it really his fault? I mean, he got flinched twice by Icicle Crash, which is not optimal, one would say. And then the second game he just won with Quaquavel, but he barely tried to sweep. His opponent more made him sweep. So did he really sweep this? I don't know. So I was like, okay, I still think the team is very solid. Gonna keep my 5th spot for him. That's great. Then at the 4th spot I put JV. Because, well, it is simple. I had him at the I had him at the 3rd spot originally, and I still think his team is really good. And, well, he won his game week 3 against Pokemon. You could say, yes, it was very hex-infested. And should he have won the game? I don't know. But at the end, he went for his win con, which is get the kill with Greninja, get Battle Bond, and then win the game. So, what else can I say? Well, what I can say is Articuno looked great in the matchup, and it kinda died an early death against the Delphox, which just Psyshocked it to death whilst it was under light screen. So that was not optimal, and yeah, he didn't scout for that, which was not optimal because it's such a great mon in the matchup. Anyways, he did not really fall for the spin block because he always knew that Annihilate will come in. I mean, he still struggled to really punish the Annihilate that's coming in. What can I say? I just think the team is solid. And even if it was a game with Hex, he still won it, and he still like did not throw it, which is my main thing. I just think the team is strong. And he did win 2 out of 3 games so far, so I was like, okay, I feel fine giving you the 4th spot. Then, on the 3rd spot, we have Mephisto. And yes, I still don't like his team. I originally had him on the 10th spot because I don't like his team. I think, yeah, Bundle and Geo, those are great breakers, those are strong mons. But the rest I didn't really like, and I felt like it's kind of one-dimensional, and I felt like you can deal with it somehow. And if you once manage to outspeed any of those threats, then you can just kill them, and it's not a big deal. But he won the first 3 games. You could say it doesn't really have to be enough to be in the top 3 in the power rankings, but it probably means you should be top 3 in the power rankings if you are one of 2 teams that's 3-0. And then 2, I actually really liked his last team build. Because yeah, you could say, oh, there's Scarf Geo, oh, there's Specs Bundle, that's just so classic. But there are also cool things there. Like there was the Tornadoes, with death investment to always take a hit from the Lilligant, with the Yachi Berry, with the idea to take the hit at +1, and then Revenge, and then Suicide Tailwind for the big threats like the Specs Bundle. I think that's a great idea, especially in such a hyper offense matchup as this was against Q. Then the other thing, which effectively won him, like the Tornadoes also won him the game, but the low kicks. I mean, yeah, you could say, okay, the opposing team telegraphs a screen offense, so of course you're bringing Brick Break. but I mean, you still have to bring brick break, and you still have to prioritize getting the low kicks in as fast as possible when the screens go up to actually click that brick break. Like, just because the set is kinda obvious, or it just makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can't fault him for bringing it. Like, it's still a great set, it's still a great bring. And I just generally liked his build. I just think, even like Scarf Chio, it made a lot of sense in the matchup. I can't fault him for that at all. Even for I kinda really want to, because I want to put him lower. Because I still don't like his team. I do not vibe with it. I wanna put him in like the bottom half. I want to. But I don't think it would be fair. I don't think it would be justified at this point. Like, if he loses his next few games, then I can do it. But right now, it's dangerous. Then I may sound too biased. We don't want that. On the number 2 slot, we have Montay, which, well, maybe I'm biased for that one, because yeah, I put him at the number 1 spot originally. Not much changed. I still think he has the best team. Like, he has the team one I like the most, and I think that has the most options. And I think I've talked before about like Terra Articuno Galar being great. I think the Titan Terra is actually still the best Terra captain. I think it's amazing. I'm still not the greatest fan that he does not have Terra Electric, but instead Ghost, Water and something. But it's fine. I think it's still great. And I did really like his battle this week. When I say his battle, it's mostly his team building. Because he decided to go full Trick Room against a team that is faster than his. And that is just a great idea. Like, he went dual Trick Room mod. He went dual or triple Trick Room sweeper. A guard jump that gets him momentum, and the Scarf Bird for everything else. Or for outside of Trick Room troubles. I think this was a great build. That's almost all I can say. Like, yes, the Earth Ring just walked into a Quagsire that countered it, so it just died. But I mean, it still did 90% damage to the Quagsire. And then you have the Breloom, which brought a lot of value. And then he had the Scarf Kilowatt Drill, which his opponent did not expect at all. He terrored immediately with the Kilowatt Drill when it was in. And I am generally a fan of late Terra, or late Dynamax, or late whatever mechanic. I just like to be safe and keep it till the end. And just kinda have mind games when I'm gonna use it. But I think it was the absolute right call to just do it right off the bat, because it removed the need to predict in this turn or any turn that Kilowatt Drill is in. Because you're all against your opposing team, you always have that safe Terra ground that you can click. You could say, oh, there's a Sarud, yeah. Have fun switching Sarud into Kilowatt Drill. Clicking Hurricane and clicking U-turn, you're gonna cry. So yeah, I think having an early Terra on the Kilowatt Drill just so you can always spam the Terra Blast ground was great. And then there were other great things like hard switching into Guard Jump on the Tinkerton. Like, that's not that crazy of a play, yeah. But it was still great. If he didn't do it, he wouldn't have been able to proc the Shuka on the SD Tinkerton under screens, and it would have claimed another mon. Maybe it would have claimed the Kilowatt Drill because of the Shuka. Because he needed the special attacker to just beat it. Because everything kinda dies to Gigaton Hammer at +2. And I mean, okay, Montay's games, all 3 of them have been very close. Like the first against El Cesar, he lost that one, but well, it was a very tense game. Then the second one against Q, it was also a very tense game till the last turn. And this one, it was also a very tense game till the last turn. Hurricane hits and you win, Hurricane misses and you lose. You could say, okay, it's very tense games. It's very close games. Is that then really number 2 spot on the power rankings? But I think it is, because the team is great. And well, then we have the number 1 spot, and I don't think this one is a surprise at all. Because it is Edison. Many already ranked her team as the number 1 spot. At the start of the season, I ranked it in number 2 because I thought Montay's team is better. Now she is a 3-0. Like in the game this week against Lars, she just had the perfect Gardevoir that waltz the entire team basically and just call mines up for free and just wins the game 6-0. She did not win the game 6-0 because it got frozen. She then made the right call to just not risk giving the opponent any turns and just switch out as soon as the opponent's Mondekan setup came in against the frozen Gardevoir, because you really don't want to give your opponent an out. Like, yes, if you fall at some point you win 6-0, but if you don't fall you could lose the game, or it could be dangerous. So she made the right call. She switched out. She lost some differential in the end, but she had the clean victory, which is everything that matters. Like she had the Corrosion Glimora to toxic things like the Corviknight, which is great if you struggle against it, which she kinda did with the Go-Goat, and she kinda wanted to let the Go-Goat sweep. And I do not like Go-Goat, and I don't think it is a good mon, and I don't think even as a Terra Captain it is a good mon, but it was decent this game. And it could have done more work, it also got frozen, but it was decent. It did its job, I can't complain about it. Then she had the classic Zapdos that you sometimes want to run against Corviknight, that always beats Mirror Armor Corviknight, or basically always beats any Corviknight, because you just click Thunderous Kick and you either Death Drop them or you get your attack boost, so that's a great set. And yeah, then you have the safety net, which is called King Gambit with Choppel, with Supreme Overlord. Like, I did really like the build, I liked the setup ideas, I liked how the Glimora can destroy, or like how the Glimora can make it so that the Go-Goat can win against the Corviknight. And yeah, I just like the general idea of the team. It worked out great. She abused the fact that she can just trace stamina and nothing can kill the Gardevoir, and it worked out great. Even if Lars would have had Roar on the Mudstyle to phase out the Gardevoir, it would have still not been that bad. Would have still been kinda great. Could have still come in later. You can't ever then risk the Mudstyle getting low, because it could always get traced on. And yeah, it makes it very scary, because you can't really use the Mudstyle as a great switch-in into things, because you could always lose against the Gardevoir then. I also agree with turn 1 just burning it. I mean, in the end it was a rest set, but it didn't really get the chance to ever click that move. And burned, it literally is just set up for the mons. Like, it doesn't do anything. So yeah, I think she made a great build, she made good calls. She was aware that she can just right away go into the Mudstyle and trace it, and she did that, and she swept him. So yeah, what can I say? That's a clear number 1 spot. Like, this was my power rankings. I hope you didn't hate it. I hope you're not gonna flame me in the comments, but you can if you want to. Of course, I can take it. Next week, I believe the power rankings will be all of the hosts together. So it should be all of the groups together, and we should have a great time. I think even websites will be available again, but I'm not sure on that yet. I'm sorry if I promised that now and then it won't happen. For all the websites fans out there, yes. But yeah, continue enjoying the Pokemon Premier League. We are all trying to make this thing a great time. We have great coaches, we have great analysts, we have generally great people working on everything. We have great editors, we have everything. We have a lot of people that actually care.